All right, everything that you ever wanted to know about 4L60E input shafts and forward drum cylinders, but we're afraid to ask. So here we have 5 different input shafts, and there's something different about all of these. So this is old school. So this either went into a 350 motor or a 4.3 liter motor. And other pre-1999 and older, you're gonna see this kind of input shaft. When they discontinued the 350 motor and they went with a 5.3, they changed the torque converter to a carbon woven clutch, and they changed the input shaft. So this is the first generation of input shaft. These are all pretty much interchangeable. I don't know of an exception to that. If I'm wrong, somebody let me know. But obviously, of course, we have the small shaft right here. We got a small lockup O-ring. Got a chuck ball in here, captured chuck ball. So that's the old school. Like I said, that would go into a 350 or maybe a 4.3. Then they went with the next generation, would be say 2000 to 2005. And you've got your ceiling rings right here. And then the next thing that happened, and hopefully I can get a good look at this. Where's a straight edge? Well, here we go. So then they went with the dummy speed sensor, okay, where they have a hole for the speed sensor right here. They have a hole for the speed sensor, but no actual speed sensor. For example, right here, this is a 06 Hummer, and it's got the whole enchilada. So here's your speed sensor. And then if you look at the input shaft, here's your trigger wheel. And then you've got your 4 sealing rings, and these 4 sealing rings are closer to the base of the input drum. They moved these back. And if you didn't know what to look for, you know, it'd be easy to miss. So this one right here is, now we're gonna lay these down. Another thing that you'll notice on the ones with the dummy, you've got these 2 grooves right here. And what I'm going to do now is lay these down side by side. They're right next to each other. And as you can see, so make this level right here, like that. So as you can see, this right here is a 5.3, and there's where the sealing ring is. And the one with the dummy speed sensor, the sealing ring is down, closer to the base. So all of these sealing rings have moved. So these are not interchangeable, obviously, because where the sealing rings ride inside the stator shaft. So here we have an example of a stator shaft with this is the hole right here into the stator shaft. So you're gonna see a different stator shaft. This is an old school stator shaft. And as you can see, you don't have a big giant hole, and this one you do. So this stator shaft would go with either either the old school 350 style or the TMBX or VJCX style. The one with the large hole will go with either the dummy lockup, the pretend lockup you might call it, or the actual one with the trigger wheel. Now you could use one with the trigger wheel on one with the dummy lockup, which I actually personally would not do, but you could get away with that theoretically, because once again, the dummy wheel is just going to turn and it's not going to excite anything because there's no speed sensor there, but the sealing rings are in the right spot. So Once again, comparing that to the TMBX style, you know, you can clearly see that the ceiling rings, and we got our 2 grooves here. The ceiling rings are in a different spot. The ceiling rings are closer to the surface of the cylinder. So old school 350, TMBX or VJCX. Now this, by the way, the torque converter for this could still be a TMBX or a VJCX. But once again, we got 2 grooves and the dummy lockup and the stator with the large hole. And then the last iteration has the ceiling rings closer. So you have an actual speed sensor, and of course inside the stator you're going to have the big hole. Not only do you have the big hole, but you also have another notch. And you've got your reluctor wheel. Now actually this Hummer reluctor wheel is clearly different. So this input shaft, wow, look at that, there's a bunch of differences here. So this input shaft to me looks to be exclusive to Hummers. See right here, you've got a groove. Well, first of all, this diameter is smaller. I'm not sure what the spline count is. Here's the groove for the lockup O-ring. I think that's going to be a different size lockup O-ring. Okay, and this reluctor wheel looks, the trigger looks a lot different. So I think this input shaft might be exclusive to Hummers. This is a Hummer H3, by the way. Now another thing is, I actually put together a cylinder yesterday, and I used this shaft only to find out that this captured check ball is missing in this one. Where it went, I know not. So now I have to, so I had to dig up another one that's the correct one with the ceiling rings at the right level. And once again, compare that to the old school TMBX here. And once again, you can see that on the TMBX, these are a little bit higher. So I had to take the cylinder apart and then start over again with another one. I'm gonna buy a chuck ball and put it in this one. I'll be able to reuse this someday. But for today, you know, to get this one job done, I don't have that option. By the way, I've never seen that before. And I only noticed it after I thought I had put together a cylinder. So you want to check this chuck ball for movement. So it's clearly good. So what I'm going to do now is, now these cylinders, by the way, once again, I believe these are universal for many, many, many different years. We've got you've got 867 8716, 867 8716. Now let's compare that over here to this Hummer. Okay, 867 8716. So how far back these cylinders go with interchangeability, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe going all the way back to 700s. I'm not 100% sure of that. So now, so I had to put ceiling rings on this. Which the ceiling ring installer that I bought, I find to be useless. So I kind of use the old-fashioned system of take a sandwich bag or any kind of plastic bag, make a few laps, and then resize it with some recirculating clamps, and then do the final resizing. This is the best resizing tool. When I get a bushing splitter, I will, because right now that won't work, but I'm going to buy a bushing splitter to get this to work. So anyway, so this is going to be my new input shaft. So a couple things. First of all, we got this slightly galled surface here. So let's, a little bit of sandpaper here to clean it up a touch. Okay, passes the fingernail test. So now there is, if you look down here in the cylinder, you'll see that there is a spline that's kind of like a guide spline. And if you look right here, there is that spline. See how this one right here is kind of joined at the tip. So that's the guide spline. So you've got to get this in the proper orientation in order to get your holes to line up. So these holes are, and I'm not sure which is which, overdrive, or I'm sorry, coast, 3/4, and forward. Corresponding with the 3 clutch packs, of course, that go inside this drum. So in order to make sure that I got the orientation right, and you can get it wrong, by the way, which I've learned the hard way, going to take a felt tip pen, a magic marker. You watch Pulp Fiction. And what I'm going to do is make a line right here from the keyway, the guide spline, right there, okay? And then, now this keyway spline, by the way, happens to line up with the, right there, and it lines up with the this hole. So there we go. Now another thing is, of course, these can leak. So I'm going to put a generous amount of sealant on this part. Below, you know, obviously we don't want the sealant to clog up these holes. That would be counterproductive. It'd be hard to do too, by the way, but anyway, so we're going to put some sealant on this part, the splines, and some sealant right here. But first, what I'm going to do is make sure I got this lined up properly. There we go. Okay. All right, now I can't have done that wrong. And what I'm going to do next is small hammer here. Tap that a little bit. And now to be sure that I've got my spline lined up properly, I'm going to look at it from this perspective. Okay, that hole right there is the hole that's going to feed that that is sealed by the front to rear seal. I'm not sure where that ended up. I'll find it eventually. But anyway, that's the front to rear. So this is what lubricates the rear of the transmission. So the question that I have right now is, so what I'm going to do now, just to be sure, is run my mark right here up to this hole. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing on the, I already did the same thing on the inside of the drum. All right, so I had it in the right spot in the first place. Uh-oh, I broke my pen, shoot. There we go, okay. All right, so there's no doubt in my mind that I currently have everything where it's supposed to be. Over here to the press we go. If you don't have a press, you can just beat this in with a hammer. Obviously, of course, you know, you want to put something over here so you don't damage the input shaft. Gonna have to have it down here pretty far. I think I still got to go another notch farther if I'm not mistaken. Yep. I wish this thing had like half intervals on it. Maybe someday I'll drill new holes into it. These things right here. Now what I've found, by the way, if these aren't completely level, then your shaft isn't going to go in straight. So you're better off just using a single, whatever one of those is. All right, so what I'm going to do now, is going to put some sealant right here on these splines. Going to put it at the end because, of course, as I push it in, it's going to want to walk up. There we go. Then I'm going to put some sealant above these holes right here. So this is going to go kind of like right below the surface. Maybe even between some of them, like this. And that way we know that we will not leak out of the drum. If that happens, by the way, this is another cause, you know, once again, if you can cure 3/4 clutch failure on this particular trans, you kind of make the trans immortal. It should theoretically, you know, because, you know, well, there's other things that do go wrong, but they're kind of rare. All right, I'm actually using way too much sealant here. Getting carried away somewhat. All right, so here we go once again, and we're going to get this lined up properly. So once again, this hole, that line, they all line up. And there we go. See, now if I had it off, I wouldn't be able to get it down this deep at this point. All right, so now our next job is to get the shaft to seat to the proper position. And it's not rocket science. You'll know when you get there. Because, of course, it's going to get a lot harder to pump it into place. I actually do know some rebuilders, by the way, that always push that seal out, or that always reseal this. I don't really think that's necessary myself. I mean, I do a leak test on all of them, and 9 out of 10 pass. And plus the 1 out of 10 that doesn't pass, you can usually feel some, you know, 1/1000ths to, you know, maybe 5/1000ths of an inch. Okay, now it's getting harder to push this down. A little bit more. Still getting harder. Okay, about running out right here. It's not moving anymore. Let's just add another half a turn here, half a thing. All right, now let's take it out. There we go. Ding. All right, so now as you can see, it's in here. And now, next question is, are all the holes properly lined up? Well, let's see. So here we have our, this is coast. It's kind of awkward to, so this is coast. So let's blast some air into here. Coast clutch piston rides, and obviously this is where fluid would come out to pressurize the coast clutch piston. Here we have forward. So forward uses the molded rubber and the green seal, which is still in this drum, the old one. And then we would have 3-4, which is the first piston in here. And it is, its hole is the big one. Right here. All right, so we have now installed an input shaft, the correct input shaft. And we've air checked it. It's at the right depth. Incidentally, so you might want to check the depth. I recommend actually doing this before and after. There's 0. So go down here. And 449. Now I wonder how that compares to this Hummer, which this is factory original. Hmm, 493, so that's 50 thousandths of an inch difference. Anywho, so, all right, this air checks though, and this is what I'm going with. It should work. Here we see again, the part number 8678716. And some of these right here, it says 90. Oh, you know, that doesn't say 90, that says 06. This happens to be an 06 that I'm working on. That Hummer is also an 06. Anyway, so boldly and decisively we go forward.